A federal law that rewrites how student loans work took effect July 1st, 2026. If your family was counting on Parent Plus or Grad Plus loans to close a funding gap, what this video covers could change the decision you're making right now, and the window to act under the old rules has already closed. This is not a policy explainer for financial aid administrators. This is a specific breakdown of what changed, which borrower profile you are, and what the gap means in dollars, so that a shift in federal law does not quietly become a crisis in your family's finances. Here's what we're going to cover. First, the 4 changes that matter in plain language. Second, which profile you are, and what the law actually does to your situation specifically. Third, the gap nobody is calculating, and the private loan pivot families are being pushed into without anyone saying so directly. And fourth, the concrete actions available by profile before the remaining windows close. Let's be precise about this. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act was signed into law on July 4th, 2025. Most of its student loan provisions became effective July 1st, 2026. For the 2026-27 academic year and beyond, here are the 4 changes that matter most. Change 1. Graduate Plus loans are eliminated for new borrowers. Previously, graduate and professional students could borrow up to the full cost of attendance through Grad Plus, tuition, fees, room, board, books, and living expenses with no annual cap. That program no longer exists for anyone who did not have a Grad Plus loan disbursed before July 1st, 2026. Change 2. Parent Plus loans are now capped. Previously, there was no specific annual limit on Parent Plus borrowing. Parents could take on whatever the school's cost of attendance required. Starting July 1st, 2026, the annual limit is $20,000 per dependent student. The lifetime limit is $65,000 per dependent student. Let's make that concrete. The average annual cost of attendance at a 4-year private university in 2025 was over $58,000. A $20,000 annual Parent Plus cap covers roughly a third of that. The gap between what the cap allows and what the school costs is now the family's problem to solve, with savings, private loans, or a different institution. Change 3. A new lifetime borrowing ceiling of $257, $500 on all federal loans combined. This applies to the total principal across subsidized, unsubsidized, and graduate loans. Parent Plus amounts are excluded from this calculation, but everything else counts. For most undergraduate borrowers, this ceiling is far above what they will actually borrow. For graduate and professional students, especially those in medicine, law, or dentistry, it is the new hard wall. Change 4. Repayment plans are being consolidated. Income-driven repayment options, IBR, Pay, Save, ICR, are being phased out. For loans disbursed on or after July 1st, 2026, there are now 2 options: a revised standard repayment plan and a new income-based plan called RAP, the Repayment Assistance Plan. For existing borrowers currently on an IDR plan, there is a deadline, July 1st, 2028. Switch to a qualifying plan before then, or the system moves you automatically. And here's what did not change: undergraduate direct loan annual limits. The amounts new undergrad borrowers can take in subsidized and unsubsidized direct loans each year are unchanged. This matters because a significant portion of the anxiety in this audience is being directed at the wrong target. The OBBBA is not primarily an undergraduate story. It is a graduate financing story, a parent financing story, a gap story. That distinction is the starting point for figuring out what this law actually means for you. Now that the rules are clear, the next question is, which of those rules actually apply to your situation? There are 3 borrower profiles inside the OBBBA's reach. The law does not affect them equally. Knowing which one you are is the difference between appropriate urgency and misdirected panic. Profile A, the existing borrower with federal loans disbursed before July 1st, 2026. If you already have active federal loans, undergraduate or graduate, in a qualifying program, there is a grandfathering provision. You may continue borrowing under the rules that applied before the law changed for up to 3 additional academic years or until you complete your current program, whichever comes first. That is a genuine window, but it is narrower than it sounds. If you change programs, transfer to a different school, take a leave of absence, or make significant changes to your enrollment status, that window may close. The grandfathering provision is conditional, not automatic. If you are in this profile, the most important thing you can do right now is contact your financial aid office and verify your specific grandfathering status before making any academic changes. Profile B, the new undergraduate borrower. No federal loans before July 1, 2026. Annual limits on direct undergraduate loans did not change. If you are starting college in fall 2026 or later, you can still access the same direct loan amounts that applied before this law. The lifetime cap of $257,500 exists, but for a standard 4-year undergraduate degree, it is not a binding constraint for most borrowers. The change that matters most for new undergrads is the repayment landscape. Loans disbursed after July 1, 2026 enter a different repayment system. The income-driven plans that gave previous generations of borrowers flexible payment amounts tied to their income, those options are gone. What that means in practice: the safety net is thinner. Understanding RAP before your loans enter repayment is not optional planning. It is the minimum you need to avoid defaulting into a plan that does not fit your income. Profile C, the new graduate student, the prospective professional student, or the parent of an undergraduate dependent, borrowing for the first time after July 1, 2026. This is the profile with the highest exposure. Graduate Plus is gone. Parent Plus is capped at $20,000 per year, and the gap between those new limits and the actual cost of attendance at most graduate programs and private universities does not disappear. It transfers. What it transfers to is the next section. And that transfer is the part of this story that almost no one is explaining clearly. Here is the mechanism. Before the OBBBA, the federal student loan system, for all its other problems, functioned as a lender of last resort with specific features built in. Income-driven repayment, public service loan forgiveness eligibility, fixed federal interest rates, deferment and forbearance options during hardship. Graduate and professional students could borrow up to the full cost of attendance. Parents could fill the gap between savings and tuition with plus loans and then manage that debt through income-sensitive repayment. The system was not designed well, but it was designed to cover the gap. Starting July 1, 2026, the system no longer covers the full gap. For a family sending a student to a private university with a cost of attendance above $55,000 per year, the new $20,000 annual Parent Plus cap covers less than half of that. The school does not lower its price because the federal cap dropped. So the question the system now hands families without fanfare is, where does the rest come from? The answer the market is offering is private loans. And here is where the mechanism becomes important. Private student loans are not federal student loans with a different logo. They are credit-based products issued by banks, credit unions, and private lenders. They do not offer income-driven repayment. They are not eligible for public service loan forgiveness. Their interest rates are variable in many cases, meaning the rate you sign for today is not necessarily the rate you will pay in year 4. And they require credit qualification for the student, the parent, or a co-signer. A family that was relying on Parent Plus to bridge a $30,000 annual gap is now being redirected toward a product with fewer protections, potentially higher costs, and a repayment structure that does not adjust if income changes. The math on that was never hidden. Nobody just showed it to you. And this is the mechanism the channel exists to name directly. The OBBBA does not destroy access to higher education. What it does is remove a federally backed income-sensitive financing option from the equation and replace it with a market-rate alternative that carries less protection and more risk. For families who understood their financing plan to include full plus coverage, that is a material change. It changes the affordability calculation for graduate school. It changes the risk profile of the parent co-signing a private loan they may carry into retirement. And it changes the honest answer to the question every family is asking right now. Can we actually afford this? The answer is no longer, the federal system will cover what you can't. The answer is, now, run the numbers for your specific situation before you sign anything. If what we've covered so far has surfaced a calculation your family hasn't run yet, there is a guide in the description built specifically for this moment. It translates the OBBBA changes into plain language, walks through the decision flowchart by borrower profile, and includes an action checklist by situation. So the next step is not figure this out alone, but follow the sequence. The link is in the description, and in the pinned comment. With that mechanism clear, here's what you can do about it. The law has changed. The window to respond has not closed entirely. Here is the action map by profile. If you are Profile A, an existing borrower with loans disbursed before July 1st, 2026, contact your financial aid office and ask one direct question. Am I grandfathered under the pre-OBBBA rules for my current program? And what would forfeit that status? Get the answer in writing or in a documented conversation. Do not transfer, change programs, or take a leave of absence before you have that answer. If you are currently on an income-driven repayment plan, IBR, PAYE, SAVE, mark July 1st, 2028 in your calendar today. That is the deadline to switch to a qualifying plan. After that date, the system places you automatically. Automatic placement is not personalized placement. If you are Profile B, a new undergraduate borrower starting after July 1st, 2026, the immediate action is understanding RAP before your loans enter repayment, not after. RAP is the new income-based option. Forgiveness under RAP begins after 30 years, not the 20 or 25 that applied to previous plans. That is a 10-year difference in the repayment timeline. The monthly payment structure under RAP is different from what your parents experienced. Know the terms of the product you're signing before you sign it. If you are Profile C, a new graduate student, a prospective professional student, or a parent borrowing for the first time after July 1st, the first step is calculating the gap. Take the full cost of attendance at the program or school you are considering. Subtract what you can cover through savings, scholarships, grants, and the new federal limits that still apply. What remains is the number your family needs to fund through private loans, work, or a different institution. That number is not a reason to abandon the plan. It is the number you need to know before the plan becomes a commitment. If the program's value does not justify bridging that gap with private debt, at private loan terms over a private repayment schedule, that is important information. If it does, if the career trajectory and income projections support the borrowing, then you are making the decision with real numbers, not with the assumption that the federal system will cover what it no longer covers. That is what this decision was always supposed to look like. The math was always calculable. Nobody just ran it for you. The guide in the description and the pinned comment takes everything in this video and converts it into a decision flowchart and action checklist for your specific borrower profile. If your family has a financing decision in front of you, that is where to go next. When did you first hear that student loan rules were changing this year? And what was the first thing you did with that information? Here is what this video was actually about. Not a policy summary. Not a breakdown of regulatory language most families will never read. It was about the specific financing gap that opened on July 1st, 2026, quietly, without announcement in the places families were actually looking, and what that gap means for the decision that is in front of you right now. The people who designed the original PLUS loan system understood something important. They understood that the gap between what families can save and what institutions charge is real, wide, and growing, and they built a federally backed product to bridge it imperfectly, expensively, but with protections. What changed on July 1st is that the bridge was narrowed, not eliminated, narrowed. And in the narrowing, the remaining gap was handed to the private market. The private market has different incentives than a federal program. It will fill the gap at a price, on its terms. What the system does not do, and has never done, is explain this to you in plain language before you sign. That gap in the information has consequences. Families who understood their financing plan to include PLUS coverage may commit to institutions and programs under assumptions that are no longer accurate. That is not their failure. That is a failure of disclosure. The next time someone asks whether the college financing plan your family built is still valid, you now have a better answer than, "I think so." You have the specific changes, your borrower profile, and the gap calculation. The math is on the table, and the table is where this decision belongs. You were right to question it. Keep going.